Some confessions squeeze your chest so tight that every word you've never said grows into a mountain, becoming heavier with time. Well, today's the day I share what this suffocation has been doing to me, the secret I've been hiding deep in my heart. I confess, at 60 years old, something happened that made me feel more alive than I ever have in my life, and it came at the most unexpected time. That morning, the hot water in the bathroom wasn't coming again. The broken faucets and my messed up routines reminded me just how much my life felt like a repeat of everything else: loneliness, silence, and routine ever since my husband passed. Whenever something in the house needed fixing, I had to call someone. I randomly picked a plumber from the phone book. Otis, the young voice on the other end, said, deep and steady, "I can come over today." There was something in his voice, something I couldn't describe, but it made me curious. I tried not to pay too much attention. After all, this was just a faucet issue. But when the doorbell rang, everything changed. When I opened the door, the young man standing in front of me was full of an energy that instantly wiped away the dullness of my life. Otis dropped his toolbox from his shoulder and onto the floor at the entrance. "Is the bathroom this way?" he asked. I hesitated for a moment before extending my hand down the hallway. "Yes, yeah, just through that door." If you want to be one of the first to know these captivating secrets, subscribe and don't forget to turn on the notifications. Watch the video until the end because it's going to get incredibly weird. I led him to the bathroom door. The young man's massive build filled up the narrow hallway. His muscles were visible through the thin shirt he was wearing. For a moment, I couldn't help myself, my eyes fixed on him. I hadn't seen a body like that in so long. I couldn't stop my gaze from lingering for a second longer than I intended. When he entered the bathroom, he moved with such confidence. It felt like he wasn't just there to fix a faucet, but to open a door that had been locked for years. "Is this the faucet?" he asked, eyeing the old fixture on the countertop. Yeah," I stammered a bit. Why was I so nervous? This was just a repair job. I kept reminding myself of that, but my heart was stubbornly trying to write a different story. Otis bent down, checking underneath the sink. As he moved, his muscles under his shirt became even more defined, and I realized I was holding my breath without even meaning to. "It's a bit of an old system," he said, checking the pipes with his hands. "But we can fix it. It might take a few hours." His calm and confident voice caught me off guard. I hadn't interacted with someone so young and so self-assured in years. Maybe that wasn't the problem. Maybe it was that something I hadn't felt in a long time was starting to surface. I was thinking about leaving the bathroom when Otis turned around, his eyes locking directly with mine. "Can I grab a towel from over there?" he asked, pointing to a small leak in the bathroom. I brought my hand to my face, embarrassed. "Of course," I said quickly. I moved to open the cabinet, but my hands were trembling as I opened the door. When I handed him the towel, our hands brushed for just a moment. I felt that tiny touch resonate all over my body. In that instant, I realized that this was more than just a simple repair job. That brief silence between us seemed to carry the weight of years of expectations. "Thanks," he said, going back to his work. But that quick look in his eyes completely shook me. I kept thinking to myself, was it just a momentary rush, or had this young man awakened something that had been frozen inside me for years? As Otis bent down to fix the faucet, I kept pacing around the bathroom. My hands didn't know what to do. They were either tangled up or gripping the counter. The silence in the room was starting to choke me, but what really tightened my chest was his presence. My eyes kept drifting to him unwillingly, his youth, his energy, how focused he was on his work. I didn't know why, but something inside me was waking up that I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I had to say something. "Not many young plumbers," I said, realizing it was kind of an unnecessary comment. "How long have you been doing this?" Otis paused and glanced back at me over his shoulder. The moment his eyes met mine, I felt a warmth rush through me, but he clearly was trying not to notice. I've been doing it for 5 years, he said, focusing back on his work. Started as an apprentice, then started my own business. My curiosity was unstoppable. How old are you? I asked, my voice carrying a hint of admiration I couldn't hide. 26, he said without hesitation. I was surprised he was so young, but at the same time, I felt a flutter inside. His youth both excited me and strangely attracted me. Ah, I said, trying to smile. If you hadn't told me you were 26, I wouldn't have believed it. You look more mature. Otis didn't answer right away, but I noticed a slight shift in his face, like what I'd said had thrown him off. After a few seconds of silence, he went back to work. His professionalism helped me pull myself together a little, but that flirtatious side of me was still there. Want some coffee after you're done with the repairs? I said as if to change the subject. I have a great coffee machine. People say my coffee is pretty damn good. He paused for a second, his shoulders tensing up. He glanced at me again like he was doing some mental calculations. Thanks, but I've got some work to do today. I'll have to head out as soon as I'm done. I couldn't deny I felt a bit disappointed, but clearly, Otis was set on keeping things professional. Maybe that's what made him even more intriguing. He took his work seriously, never letting his professionalism slip even at his young age. When he finished the job, I noticed him glancing at me a couple of times as he packed up his toolbox. There was something in those looks: attraction, curiosity, but also hesitation. All done, he said, slinging the toolbox back over his shoulder. The hot water should be working fine now. If there's any issue, just give me a call. I will, for sure, I said, gripping the frame next to the door. Thanks for handling it so quickly. Guess that's the advantage of youth. This time, he smiled slightly but still didn't break his professional demeanor. He walked toward the door, paused for a second like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He just nodded at me and left. It felt like there was a bond forming between me and that young guy, something that should never have happened. But I didn't know where it was going. All I knew was that, for the first time in a long while, my heart was beating fast. I couldn't help but ask myself, was this just a plumbing issue, or had this young guy entered my life to change something? The next morning, when I went into the bathroom to take a shower, I noticed the faucet was still only giving cold water. I don't know if I'd ever been so happy over a malfunction before. My hand was a little shaky as I found Otis's number in my contacts and called him. My heart raced as the phone rang. Hey, Otis, I said, adding a little desperation to my voice. I think the faucet you fixed yesterday is ... is acting up again. I'm really sorry, but would it be possible for you to come back? Otis's voice was as professional as ever, but he hesitated for a moment. Sure, I'll bring some spare parts with me this time so we can fix it for good. I'll be there in about an hour, I thanked him, and as I hung up, a weird wave of excitement spread through me. This time, I wanted to be somehow more prepared. But at the same time, I wanted to look unprepared. While rummaging through my wardrobe, my hand reached for my favorite black lace nightgown. Just something comfortable, I tried to convince myself. But I knew it wasn't working when I looked at myself in the mirror. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and opened the door. Otis's eyes wandered over me for a split second, but he quickly gathered himself. He had his tool bag with him, plus a few pipe pieces. Hey, I said, acting like my outfit was totally normal. I hope I'm not bothering you too much. This faucet is driving me crazy. Otis avoided my gaze and headed for the bathroom door. No problem, he said. I'll fix it for good this time. I followed him into the bathroom as he bent over to fix the faucet. I noticed every move of his body. His hands were quick and skilled, but he seemed a little more tense. Does this kind of thing happen often? I asked, trying to fill the silence. The thin fabric of my nightgown brushed against my skin, making me feel even bolder. I mean, do the things you fix break again sometimes? Otis didn't look up as he answered, Sometimes. But this time, I'm sure it'll be fine. I've got every part I might need with me. How careful you are, I said, giving him a slight smile. I guess you're really good at your job, even for someone so young. While I was reaching for the faucet, I accidentally brushed my hand lightly against his arm. Otis froze for a moment, but then got back to his work. He didn't even look at me, but I could feel his tension. I'm just trying to do my job, he finally said, his voice a little quieter. There was silence for a while. His distant attitude made me even bolder. While he was leaning over to look at a pipe under the faucet, I briefly touched his back with my hand. Really hard to find someone as skilled as you, I said, my voice carrying a light joking tone. This time, Otis straightened up and looked at me. There was something in his eyes, uncertainty, tension, and an attempt to hold on to control. Sarah, he said, even saying my name like he was trying to keep boundaries. This job's almost done. After this, I won't bother you anymore. But the harshness in his voice seemed to break for a second. Watching him try to escape from this situation stirs something inside me. It was excitement, a desire I hadn't felt in a long time. I didn't know how much longer this tension could last, but we were at a limit, and who would cross that line was entirely up to us. As Otis leaned over to fix the faucet, I leaned against the nearby cabinet and started watching him. The thin fabric of my nightgown fit my body more with every move I made, creating a rather provocative posture. Otis was pretending not to notice, but I didn't miss the slight tremble in his hands. The tremble was proof that he wasn't fighting me, he was fighting himself. Are you sure you know exactly what you're doing? I asked, adding a light teasing tone to my voice. Otis didn't look up as he continued to work, but his breathing seemed to quicken. Of course, he said in a short reply. This is a piece of cake. Really, I said, stepping a little closer. Then why does it break again every couple of days? I bent down, pretending to grab a towel from the cabinet. As I did, the thin strap of my nightgown slipped off my shoulder. The way I felt wearing it just gave me more courage. When Otis looked up at me, his eyes stopped for a brief second. Then he quickly went back to his work, but this time, he was moving faster, like he wanted to get this over with as soon as possible. Maybe there's something else in the bathroom causing the problem, he said, tightening the faucet. But his voice had a slight crack in it, trying to sound firm. Maybe, I said, leaning back against the cabinet. Or maybe the problem is just not finding the right touch. I let that sentence hang in the air. The silence suddenly thickened, and the tension in the small space of the bathroom became almost unbearable. Otis stayed silent for a moment longer, then put his tools down and stood up. His movements were slow, but the expression on his face was conflicted. On one side, control, on the other, a desire he was trying to restrain. I got even closer to him, and now the distance between us was less than just a few inches. I could hear his breath. Otis, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but before I could finish, his hands were on my waist. Sarah's lips were filled with more and more tension with each passing second. The trembling in Otis's body was a sign that something was about to change fast. All that silence between us was broken by nothing but our breathing and heartbeats, and in that moment, everything collided. Sarah, we shouldn't do this, he said, but this time his voice was weak, full of a kind of helplessness. Really? I said, getting closer to him, are you sure, Otis? At that moment, he hesitated, as if he couldn't take it anymore, and then, unexpectedly, kissed me on the lips. Our kiss started slow and unsure, but before long, the passion between us exploded. With our eyes closed, we locked into each other. Otis pulled me closer with every passing second, and we started moving towards the bedroom, bumping into walls as we went. Our hands tangled together, our hearts raced, and in a moment of wildness, I could feel everything changing fast. By the time we stepped into the bedroom, Otis had a firm grip on my waist, and without resisting, I quickened my steps. Everything had happened so fast that before I even realized it, We were caught in a physical pull. While my mind was still processing everything, my body had already surrendered to him. It was both a mistake and something irreversible. When we got to the bedroom, everything had suddenly fallen apart. Otis's t-shirt was in the bathroom, and his pants were on the floor by the bed. My thin fabric nightgown was in the hallway, dragged across the carpet. Everything was a mess, and yet neither of us could calm down. We were lying on the bed, glued to each other, our bodies still touching, our every breath following each other. Everything had happened so fast that for a moment, it was as if time had stopped. It was hard to describe what I was feeling. I felt like I was in the middle of a sea of everything. Otis's strong arms were on my body. My eyes were closed, but somehow I could still hear everything. "Can you breathe?" I asked, smiling slightly, leaning my head against his chest. My hands were still on his body. I could feel every movement. "Yes," Otis said, his voice trembling, slowly but determined. "I guess ... yes. But I've never felt anything like this before." There was silence for a few seconds. At that moment, Otis's breathing got a little faster, and I couldn't ignore it. "Really?" I said, my lips still warmer than his. "So what do we do now, Otis?" "I don't know. But I guess everything was as complicated as it was, right?" he said, running his hands through my hair. "But one thing is true, having you with me right now is more than anything else." For a moment, I lost track of time. Everything in my mind was blurred. I was just enjoying the moment, but then, suddenly, the clarity returned to my eyes, and I wondered if this moment was really a moment of madness or something more. "How do we explain this?" I asked with a slight smile. Otis looked at me for a moment, indecision in his eyes, but also a deep desire. "I don't think we need to explain it," he said slowly. "Sometimes things don't need an explanation." We lay close together on the bed, our breaths mingling, caught up in the magic of the moment. But one question still swirled in my head: was this just a moment of madness, or was this the beginning of something else? Slowly, looking into Otis's eyes, I asked, "How does this end, Otis?" "Haven't you thought about it?" Otis thought a little longer, then took a deep breath. "We'll think about it later," he said, running his hands through my hair. "Right now, let's just enjoy this moment." The emotions inside me shifted in a complex way, but one thing was certain: this moment was beyond everything. This night, this moment would be ours alone, and no matter what happened, it would remain unforgettable. Then there was silence. But this silence was an opportunity to understand more than the past, more than the future, more than everything. If you've made it this far, I know you're hooked on the story. There's so much to share, and you don't want to miss any of it. Don't forget to hit the follow button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment on this story. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, so let's chat in the comments.